All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. First of all, I must apologize for last week. If anybody tried to, I know a couple of you tried to tune in, and I completely didn't have time to post on there that I wasn't going to be able to live stream last week. And actually, the live streaming is going to probably go on a hiatus for the next few weeks, maybe even a little bit longer, probably through August. And the reason is that my summer is very busy. So I just kind of want to put that out there that, yeah, it's amazing how quickly my summer gets busy, but I'm teaching summer camps, and most often it's in the afternoons, 1 to 4 p.m. And then I'm also doing a couple weeks of a high school art program. And so pretty much starting next week all the way through the middle or late into August, I'm pretty going to be pretty busy during the week. So probably going to take a hiatus, but I'm going to continue doing the mixed media Mondays because those are pre-recorded and I can find time. So if I can sneak in any kind of live streams, I will, but I have a feeling that they're going to be a lot more sporadic and maybe spread out. Definitely not going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, just like I said, because that's going to be right in the smack in the middle of like when I'm doing stuff. So anyway, so kind of gonna take a break from this for a little while, but the plan is to pick back up and continue with it as I can. So anyway, just kind of wanted to apologize for not being here last week, and then just to explain that going forward over the next couple months, probably I'm not going to be around. So just keep an eye on the Facebook page, and anytime I do a live stream or put out videos, they're going to be there. So um, anyway, so today has been a busy day. I've been running, well, not really running around, but working a lot in the studio, trying to get some things going. If you haven't checked it out, I am having a summer studio sale where I'm selling some of my artworks. It's over on my website, and if you use the discount code summer15, all uppercase, all together, no spaces, you can save 15%. Unfortunately, it's only for the U.S. For those of you that are in a different country, if you're willing to pay the shipping and all the whatever else, the whatever fees there are with shipping, I'll be happy to ship it to you. But anyway, so today I'm going to continue working in that little journal. So I started this little journal way back in May. So here we are, May, June. So 2 months into it, and it's getting pretty full. I have not worked on it outside of the live streams. So kind of where I left off last time is where it is now. But today I was looking through it and I started thinking like, well, I know I just I'm in no shape to think is basically what it boils down to. So I just pulled out the colored pencils, and I think that notion of embellishment and going back and looking at pages that are feeling pretty resolved and pretty finished, and then just kind of finding ways to put those like polishing touches on it, those little subtle things that kind of will give it an even more resolved feeling. So um, anyway, so that's what I'm going to do today. Let me go ahead and switch this over. So well, actually, before I do, just thank you for being here. And yeah, let me go and switch this over. So I've got my little journal. I just got some colored pencils. These are Derwent Color Soft pencils. Pretty good pencils, but really any kind of pencils will work. I mean, that's the one nice thing about journaling is that you don't need the most expensive the professional quality materials. I mean, it does make a difference. The better quality materials, the brighter the color is going to be, the richer things are going to look, the more intense things are going to be. But it's like you could really just use almost anything. And I think one of my goals for the fall is going to be to do some journaling or mixed media using some of those just some inexpensive materials, just to kind of like maybe do a compare and contrast thing. So anyway, if you tuned in at the end of May, I had talked about like going back and embellishing, and I did things like shading around these windows with some ink, just kind of doing a scribbling texture. I also used the colored pencils and did things like, just kind of shaded around this. So when I'm in that kind of mood where I just don't want to think too much, or I'm not really sure what I want to do, then turning to colored pencils, turning to other things is actually a really good place to get started, and it gets my hand moving. So anyway, I just turned to this page, and I think what I want to do is I want to start off with this edge around this profile, and just to sort of maybe make it a little bit more distinct. And I'm going to pull out. So I've got a couple different colors. I do have an ochre. I think I'm not sure what the color was. It may have been the mustard color or a tan color that I have, but it's kind of like a yellow ochre color. So I'm going to start off with these pencils. I know if I do the darker shade first, that's going to work out better. Some pencils, it really doesn't matter, but just like I've done before, I'm just going to shade around. I really like the colored pencil. I really like the look of the water soluble pencils and the colored pencils, because with the water soluble pencils, I tend to see that, it's not as crisp and clean and even as I might like. I have some perfectionist tendencies. Um, I've always been that way. Just kind of growing up, I taught myself how to draw, taught myself how to do a lot with art, and I really focused a lot on building up my skill, especially drawing. And so I have a tendency to really want my work to be sort of highly polished and kind of neat and clean. I've tried to loosen up. I'm not saying that working neat and clean and kind of being a bit of a perfectionist is a bad thing. It's just that I know sometimes it can kind of derail me, and I get so caught up in like, oh, I've got this has got to be perfect and neat and clean and all that, that I kind of lose sight of things and maybe not focus so much on other things. So to me, I've been over the years, I've been really striking that balance between loose and free, and being a little bit tighter with the way I use materials. And I do think there's sort of that balance act. I think if you're too tight, then it just feels, the piece feels kind of tight. It feels like a little too rigid. And then sometimes if you're a bit too free, it can feel a bit messy and disjointed. So with the water soluble pencils, I love it because you get those painterly effects, and you can cover a lot of area. You don't get the white of the paper showing through. So if I were to use the colored pencil straight on white paper, the white paper shows through. That's how you control the value. You press harder, you cover up more of the white of the paper. You press softer, and the sort of deeper pits in the paper, because paper really is, it's like this mountain range if you looked at it underneath a microscope. So there, the high points pick up the color, pick up the pigment, and the low points don't. And so that's why when you're shading, you can see like all these like little white speckles. And when you use the water soluble pencil underneath, you don't have all those white speckles. And so the water soluble material is a great way to make it feel more solid, I feel. And then you don't have to press. Um, I know on social media a lot, there, especially the companies that make colored pencils or make paper, like Strathmore does it a lot. Uh, Strathmore's a paper company, but they'll show these people that do these highly realistic, like photographic, uh, realistic images, and they do it all in colored pencil. But you have to press so hard with the colored pencil and blend it. It's more like painting. And so if you use the water soluble materials first, you really kind of get this nice like background, this nice layer underneath. And then coming back on top and shading Just helps smooth things out, even things out, especially like edges. I find that I can come back with a colored pencil and really get sharp, crisp edges with the colored pencil. So the Derwent ink tense pencils, they are water soluble. So water soluble is they're just well, the ink tents are water soluble ink, so not watercolor pencils, but they act just like any watercolor pencil. And then these are just regular, they're colors, Derwent's Color Soft colored pencils, which are a little bit, I think are more of a wax-based colored pencil. Yeah, so just like going back with that, this is a pale brown is what it's called, and this is an ochre. Just kind of, darkens that edge up, makes that profile pop out more. And so I think what I want to do is just to kind of flip through and find other areas where I can use the colored pencil. That's another way of sort of making things tie together. It's like I jump around a lot, and sometimes I'll use a lot of different materials, but that can really be like disjointed, kind of create this disjointed feeling. But if I sit down and use just a single material and go throughout, like, in here, back in May, probably I went through with colored pencil and shaded around and kind of tied all that together. Um, but just like going through and finding those areas, like, maybe here, maybe I can come back and maybe I want to get more of this reddish color. So the name of that color with the ink tents is called Shiraz. Unfortunately, even though it's made by the same company, they don't have a Shiraz in here, but they have one that's very similar. This is called Loganberry, and it's a kind of, I don't know if it's the exact same pigment, but it's very similar. And so just going around and shading, again, it's just going to kind of neaten up the ink tense pencil, the water soluble pencil that's underneath. I can kind of smooth out any dark marks, or I can cover up maybe where I didn't quite get the pencil in the first time. So even if I was using a different brand of pencil, like a Prismacolor or whatever, if I had a big enough set, I would probably have a pencil that would closely match the Inktense pencil. And it's through like years of doing this that I kind of know, like, oh yeah, that pencil matches that color. And um, sometimes it just takes a little bit of trial and error to kind of figure those things out. And so I just want to stop here and just kind of show you, like, here's, I've shaded around this area, but then if you look at the others, I haven't done it. And you can kind of see a little bit of a difference. It's just a little bit darker. It's a little bit neater, a little bit tighter around it. So yeah, so the pencils that I'm using right now, Francis, are the Derwent Color Soft pencils. And they're just a typical colored pencil. And like I said, I believe they are wax based. And then the pencil I use underneath is the Inktense pencils. Now, one thing that I've noticed, and actually it happens even with watercolor, is that when you're using watercolor or watercolor pencil or even the Derwent Inktense pencils, the when it dries, it's not as intense, it's not as bright. And that is something that like watercolor artists really kind of take into consideration. So when you're using watercolor paint and you paint it and it looks really bright, and then as it dries, a lot of times it like lightens up. Um, and so what I find is that that happens even with the Inktense uh, pencils and the Inktense paints. Um, and so what I find is that with the colored pencil, I can go back and sort of bring that intensity back, that brightness back. There are times whenever I'll do something with the watercolor and the Inktense paints or Inktense pencils, and I'm like, oh wow, that like really glows. And then what I find is that, as it dries, it's like, oh, it's not as bright, it's not glowing anymore. So it's kind of like with this, like, when I painted this yellow paint, so I was using the Shiraz with yellow paint. This yellow paint was really intense, and there's still like some spots where it feels really bright, but I'm gonna bring that back and kind of make it more intense. It's another reason I like to use the colored pencil on top of the water soluble pencils. If I was doing this with graphite, so they make water soluble graphite pencils, I could do this just with a regular drawing pencil, graphite drawing pencil, and come back and work on top of it. So even though I added details like the silver and black around it to embellish this, I am kind of working on it more just to really bring it to a good resolution. Like I've mentioned before, I try not to say like, oh, it's finished or it's completed. As a public school art teacher for 20 years, would hear that a lot from the kids, like, I'm done. And it's like, well, you can always work to improve it. And that's why I think, Picasso said that artwork's never done. It just stops in interesting places. Is that you can always add things to it, make changes, make things better. Um, but then you can also overwork stuff. You keep working on it and adding things, and then it can get real busy, and you just sort of put too much into it. All right, so I've shaded in with that pencil, really brought out some darker value. I want to brighten up this yellow now. So I'm going to turn to my yellow uh, colored pencil. This is called Deep Cadmium. And so it's a very bright, um, very rich kind of golden yellow. And it should blend in nicely. And so I'm barely touching it and just kind of going over where the yellow is. And, so I barely touched it. I don't know if you can see, but it's just more yellow and just a little bit brighter. I'm not going to press super hard. I don't want it to be like this bright glaring yellow. But just by putting a little bit of it in there, I can sort of brighten up the yellow. I can just shade it kind of on top of wherever I want it to be brighter. And because I have the paint and the water soluble pencil down, I don't see like the streaks of the colored pencil. It just sort of blends in with it all. So again, just kind of stop to show, yeah, like when we start to look up through here, and just, there's just more yellow. just a little bit brighter. I mean, it's not a lot. And I tend to think about the embellishments as kind of fine tuning things, and oftentimes it's a lot more subtle. So I just find that as you're like building up layers on the pages, that the layers that come later often are not as like game changing. They don't make a huge difference, but even the subtle effects that you can get can really bring a whole new dimension to a page and just really give it some oomph. And then, like I said, like when I'm in that mood where I'm like, yeah, I don't want to think too much. I can shade without thinking. I mean, yeah, I have to think about what I'm doing and how I'm applying it, but I'm not like trying to figure out like what the theme of a page is, or if I'm going to use words, or what kind of collage image am I going to use. So it didn't make a huge difference, but I think that it. Sorry, something just popped up on my computer. Um, so it's just a bit more subtle, but just feels a little bit more polished, a little bit more finished now. So I still, haven't done anything else to the pages near the end here. So there's still a lot that I want to do. So I'll kind of not go much further. This is starting to feel more finished. But I don't know. It's like I'm feeling like I want to do something around the rectangles that I put in, but I'm thinking might want to do that with the water soluble pencils or with paint. So I think I'm just going to stick with the colored pencils today. That's kind of like my thought. It could change, but just flipping back and forth. So I like this page, but it still feels pretty open. I feel like I want to have some layers on it. So I think I am going to work on this page and dive in with, I think just this green. I'm going to have to get a new pencil. It's getting pretty short. I think what I want to do is I want to pull out little squares that I did over here, and just to go back and just like I've been doing, just adding some shading. So that shading around those squares, that's just going to help them pop out. I could do that. I could have done that first with paint or with the water soluble pencils. So sometimes this might be the part that people don't like so much. It's a little bit more of slow work, and just thinking about how sometimes we want like the high payoff things, but I think with any work, we have to kind of go back and think about like how can I improve things? How can I make things better? And sometimes you just need to kind of put in the labor to fine tune things and to add some polish to it. So that helps those squares kind of pop out a little bit more, gives it a little bit of dimension. I mean, the rest of this is is pretty like, oops, sorry, is still pretty kind of empty. And I think it's in part because I have that tape transfer. So this is one of those cicadas with the tape. And so I can't do anything on top of it, but you know what? I'm gonna draw some attention to that. And but at the same time echo what I've done over here. So I'm just gonna take my pencil and go right along the edge of that tape and just shade in. So what that does is it breaks up the space, kind of creates a division between the cicada and the background. But when I think about the space, so if we've got this green background, there's some texture and stuff in it, but it's pretty it's pretty even. And so using the pencil, I can start to break that up so that it's not just all kind of one flat area behind everything. I mean, this crack breaks up that space, but then I want to further break up some of the screen space. So this gets broken up because I shaded around those little squares. So now I'm kind of making a big square around the tape transfer. And then I think what I'm going to do is break this up a little bit further. I'm going to bring a line down, but I'm going to shade on one side of it. And maybe do the same thing down here. So as I'm doing this, I can see the shading. It looks kind of rough, as I was mentioning. Like when you shade on white paper, you'll see all this like little white specks, and that's the paper showing through. Um, and it's not a big deal, but I want to smooth it out a little bit. So I'm going to pull out a different color. So I've got a lime green, which is more of a yellow green, and that's going to help tie in. So if I put that over top of the green I just put down, that should kind of help blend it in a little bit. And it'll bring some more yellow into it. So I started using this lime green around this circle that's underneath everything here, but it's not quite dark enough. I do have, they call it light green, so it's still kind of a yellow green, but it's a little bit darker. So I just want to bring a little definition to this circle. Might as well use this around some of my squares too. And I think I'll finish that up. I've got a yellow here called acid yellow, and it's got just a bit of a greenish tinge to it. So it should tie in really nicely with some of the yellowish color in the background. And just like on that last spread that I was working on, this is just going to kind of brighten things up, make things a little bit more intense. So now that I look at this, I mean, I like it much better. I mean, it's subtle. There's not a huge change, but the way that the values now kind of break up this space over here, that it's not just sort of a flat yellowish greenish background, and that the way the colored pencil fills in around the squares helps break up this side, and then the yellows and such really kind of intensified. So again, very kind of subtle changes, but just kind of takes it up a step and just refines it a little bit. So I'm not going to do like every single page, just like a lot of the techniques, just kind of bouncing through and finding places to work on them. And like I said, I've done a little bit of this before. So, but I can always look through and find, like, I kind of feel like with this one, it's very similar to that last spread that I shared. There's just, I don't know, it's a little disjointed. Um, but I feel like it could use something else. So I was thinking like around all these little squares and rectangles, but I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to hold off on that. But yeah, I think that's, yeah. So actually, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. It's a good place to stop. Um, just kind of flipping through one last time to see if there's anything else that I want to tackle or dive into today. All right. Yeah, I think that's going to kind of wrap it up for today. All right. So yeah, I mean, it just like kind of in that mood, just to sort of shade and not really dive into anything too deep. No deep thoughts today. Um, but just kind of working on bringing some finish and some polish to some of those pages where they felt pretty resolved and pretty finished, but just adding a little bit of the colored pencil just sort of made some things pop a little bit. As Bonnie said, that that yellow especially kind of worked to brighten things without like really screaming. So that's a good way of putting it. But yeah, so like I said, that's going to kind of wrap it up for today. And like I said, I'm not going to be able to live stream for the next couple months, but at least at the same time, I might be able to sneak in a live stream here or there if it's like really early or really late. Um, or I might be able to at least like do some pre-recorded videos and put them in at a certain time, like schedule them to pop up at a certain time. But we'll see what I can get into and how busy things are. But yeah, so anyway, I really appreciate you popping in every week and catching up with me and making art with me. And I always love seeing what you're doing. So if you uh, want to post things in the comments and let people take a look, or if you post things on social media, if you tag me, um, I always love seeing that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I really appreciate you being here, and thank you so much for joining me once again. And not sure when I'll be back, but I will be back. So thank you so much, and as always, happy creating.